The ventilator alarm screamed at 2:47 a.m. I ran. My daughter's lips were turning blue. Someone had cut our power. And when I saw the security footage, I realized it wasn't an accident. It was our HOA president. It happened on a night so quiet that even the ticking of the clock felt like thunder against the walls. The kind of silence that makes you believe everything is safe until it isn't. Until it shatters in a single blink. Where are you watching from? Comment your city and tell me, what would you have done if this happened to your family? My daughter, Emma, was 9 years old, a bright soul trapped inside a fragile body that fought her every breath. Muscular dystrophy had stolen her strength piece by piece, and by the time she was 6, a ventilator had become her constant companion. Every soft hum of that machine was the sound of life itself in our home. My wife and I had adjusted to the rhythm of hospital appointments, medical equipment, and constant vigilance. We had learned to live between alarms and oxygen readings, between hope and fear. The one thing we never imagined was that someone could look at our little girl's struggle and feel anything other than compassion. But that illusion died the night the power stopped. At first, I thought it was a random outage. Then, when I rushed into Emma's room and saw her eyes wide open in terror, lips beginning to tint blue under the pale glow of her nightlight, my heart went cold. The ventilator's emergency alarm blared, shrill and desperate, a scream from the edge of death itself. I grabbed the manual resuscitator, pumping air into her lungs as my wife called 911, tears streaking her face, her voice breaking with every word. In those frantic minutes, I tried to think logically, like the FBI agent I was trained to be. Backup generator, battery, fuse. Nothing explained the outage. When the paramedics arrived and connected portable support, one of them mentioned that the rest of the street still had power. That's when something inside me shifted from fear to suspicion. I stepped outside and followed the line of streetlights glowing steadily down the block, while our house alone sat in darkness. The neighborhood was silent, the kind of silence that hides guilt. I checked the main power box near our fence, and what I saw made my blood boil. The breaker was switched off manually, the metal latch still warm from a recent touch. My training told me this wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. And in our community, there was only one person who had made it her mission to control, punish, and humiliate anyone who didn't fit her perfect vision of suburban order, the HOA President, Karen Miller. Karen had always despised the sight of Emma's medical equipment outside our house. The oxygen tanks, the accessible ramp, the emergency van parked in our driveway, she called them eyesores during meetings. She fined us for clutter, issued warnings about unauthorized modifications, and once even told me to keep the hospital vibe inside. I'd ignored her petty cruelty before, but cutting the power to a life support machine crossed a line no human should ever approach. I spent that night beside Emma's bed at the hospital, watching her sleep under the hum of sterile machines, the gentle rise and fall of her chest reminding me what almost wasn't. The next morning, when she squeezed my finger weakly and whispered, "Daddy, did I do something wrong?" I knew I couldn't let it go. I didn't tell her the truth yet, that someone had tried to hurt her. I simply told her, "No, sweetheart, you did everything right. Someone else made a very bad choice." When I got home, I examined the power box more carefully. There was residue from a glove, likely latex, and faint impressions on the latch. I photographed everything, collected samples, and called a friend in forensics who owed me a favor. While waiting, I pulled up the footage from our security cameras. One of the side cameras captured a faint silhouette around 11:42 p.m. A figure in a light coat, walking quickly, stopping near the box, then disappearing into the darkness. I zoomed in, adjusted contrast, and froze. The profile was distinct. The posture, the hair, even the reflective HOA badge pinned to the jacket. It was Karen. She had done it herself. She hadn't sent someone else. She had physically come to our home and cut power to my daughter's ventilator. I stared at that image, fury roaring inside me like wildfire, but years of FBI discipline kept me from storming over there immediately. Instead, I documented every second. I contacted local law enforcement, handed over preliminary evidence, and requested they hold off public action until I gathered more. I wanted an airtight case, one that no lawyer could twist into a misunderstanding. Over the next few days, I started connecting dots. Neighbors who had complained about Karen's threats, old emails she'd sent about enforcing order, notes she'd left for people with disabled family members telling them to keep the community clean. It wasn't about rules for her. It was about control, about power in the ugliest sense of the word. She'd fined an elderly veteran for leaving a flag out past sunset. She'd threatened to tow cars belonging to hospice nurses who came to help a terminally ill resident. And now, she'd tried to play God with my daughter's life. 3 days later, at the monthly HOA meeting, I sat quietly in the back, letting her go through her usual routine, lectures about lawn lengths, recycling bins, and maintaining standards. I waited until she started boasting about how she'd handled an electrical issue near my home. Her tone dripped with smugness, and when she smiled toward me as if daring me to speak, I rose. Every eye turned. I said nothing at first. I simply placed a USB drive on the table. "Play it," I told the board. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, the footage of her walking to my power box, switching it off, and walking away without a glance back. Gasps rippled through the room. Her face drained of color. She tried to sputter an excuse, something about maintenance checks, but before she could finish, I placed my FBI credentials on the table beside the drive. "You committed a federal offense," I said evenly, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. "Interfering with life support equipment crosses every legal and moral line there is. You didn't just violate HOA rules. You violated humanity." She tried to bolt, but local officers whom I'd briefed earlier were waiting outside. They took her into custody right there, in front of everyone she'd bullied for years. As they led her out, she hissed something under her breath about people like you ruining communities. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The investigation that followed revealed she'd tampered with several residents' property before, cutting power to security cameras, disconnecting satellite dishes, even vandalizing accessibility ramps. It wasn't enforcement. It was harassment. The prosecutor pursued charges of reckless endangerment, tampering with medical equipment, and attempted manslaughter. She faced 15 years. During the trial, I sat behind Emma, who insisted on attending even though I wanted to shield her from it. When the jury saw the footage and heard the paramedic describe how close Emma had come to cardiac arrest, the room fell silent. The judge's voice trembled with outrage as he read the sentence. Karen wept, but not from remorse, only from shock that her authority had crumbled. Afterward, reporters surrounded me, asking how I'd managed to stay calm, how I'd built the case so meticulously. I told them I hadn't done it as an agent. I'd done it as a father. My badge gave me tools, but love gave me purpose. And that's what made the difference. Over the following months, I used every contact I had to push for new community regulations, protecting medically dependent families from utility interference. The story spread across the country, headlines calling it the HOA power outrage. Politicians took notice. Within a year, legislation passed, making it a federal crime to deliberately cut off life-sustaining electrical support. Emma's case became a symbol of how negligence and cruelty can hide behind neighborhood rules and how one act of justice can change everything. But healing wasn't simple. Even after the victory, I found myself waking at 2:47 a.m., listening for the hum of that ventilator, my chest tightening until I heard it steady and strong. Trauma leaves echoes. One evening, months later, Emma asked if she could send a letter to Karen. I hesitated, unsure what she could possibly want to say. She handed it to me sealed, but curiosity got the better of me after she slept. Inside was a simple message in her crooked handwriting. "I forgive you. I hope you never forget what you did." "But I forgive you." I cried that night, not from pain, but from the strange, humbling power of mercy coming from a child who had every right to hate. Life slowly returned to normal. Emma grew stronger with new therapies, and every time I heard her laugh echo down the hallway, it reminded me that monsters sometimes wear neighborly smiles, but they can be unmasked when truth stands tall. On her 10th birthday, she blew out the candles, something we once thought she'd never do without help, and said, "Daddy, can we make sure other kids like me are safe too?" That's when I knew her story wasn't about survival anymore. It was about purpose. We started a foundation together, the Lifeline Project, dedicated to ensuring every medically dependent family has backup power, legal protection, and a voice that can't be silenced by cruelty. Donors poured in. Families reached out with gratitude. Hospitals partnered with us to create emergency networks for homebound children, all because one person's hatred sparked another's resolve. Sometimes I still drive past the old HOA office. The sign is gone now, replaced by a new board led by people who actually care. They built a small memorial garden near the entrance, dedicated to resilience and kindness. At the center stands a plaque engraved with Emma's words, "Forgive, but never forget." I stand there sometimes, watching neighbors plant flowers together where anger once ruled. It's strange how light can grow in the cracks left by darkness. Years later, when Emma was invited to speak at a law enforcement conference about community safety, she began her speech with the same line that started it all. "The night the power went out, my dad saved my life." Then she paused, looked at the audience, and added, "But he also saved hers, the woman who almost took it, because he taught me that justice isn't revenge. It's making sure no one else suffers the same." There wasn't a dry eye in that room, not even mine. Watching her, standing tall in her wheelchair, voice steady, eyes bright, I realized that while I had been fighting for justice, she had been teaching me grace. That night, after the applause, she turned to me and whispered, "Daddy, it's finally over." And maybe it was. The fear, the anger, the what-ifs, they finally faded. All that remained was pride. Pride in a little girl who refused to let hatred define her. Pride in a community that chose compassion after corruption. And pride in the fact that even in the darkest moments, truth and love can still win. So when people ask me now if I ever regret confronting Karen, if I wish I'd stayed silent to keep peace, I tell them peace built on silence is just fear wearing a mask. Real peace is earned when you protect the innocent and confront evil head-on, no matter where it hides, even behind HOA bylaws. My badge gave me the power to act, but my daughter's courage gave me the reason. And in the end, that reason saved her life, changed the law, and reminded the world that one flick of a switch can either end a life or spark a movement.